Borders are one of the quirkier things in this world, sometimes having rather obvious placements to downright illogical reasoning in their origins. Some are almost imaginary in their necessities, and some are brutally enforced. And some were placed well after the areas were already inhabited. I mean, you can't let a good building get in the way as something as dumb as a border, can we? So let's get into some of the weirder and more interesting borders around the world. The Canada-US border is the longest in the world, and with a border that long, you would expect some quirks, no? Now, while it might be unmanned and for the most part undefended, there is still a noticeable line drawn in the proverbial sand, or forest in this instance. The border literally has a line drawn across mostly the 49th parallel to indicate to the average person that they were at a border and to not cross, and it's referred to as the slash. Literally, the whole divider between the two countries has this slash, and a whole commission was actually set up to do just this. Every 6 years, the International Boundary Commission gets out and maintains it with an annual budget of only $1.4 million. And considering how remote that most of this border is, that's an impressive feat. Also, the idea of tying most of the border to simple latitudes made sure there were some oddities thrown in. You see, people were here before the border was decided on, and those people set up shop where they thought best. Now, the town of Derbyline, Vermont is one such place, with the border being accidentally drawn through the town in 1842. Next up is a Belgian bike path that literally cuts through Germany and was a byproduct of 2 world wars. The Vennbahn Cycleway, or Venn Railway, is an old railway line that was built by Prussian State Railways in 1885. After Germany took Belgium in the First World War and consequently gave it up with the Treaty of Versailles, the ownership of that railway was also provided to the Belgian government as it secured the economies of 2 Belgian towns. And at that point, no one could really trust Germany for obvious reasons. After it was given over to Belgium, though, it basically cut off 6 different regions of Germany and turned them into literal enclaves, cut off from the rest of Germany by a strip of land they could not cross. And again in 1940, Hitler re-annexed the line back to full German control, and again they lost it after World War II, and it returned to Belgian control. And there it's pretty much stayed. After the war, though, the industrial use of the railway declined steadily until it was shut down and partially dismantled in 1989. Meaning there was this meaningless line of Belgian territory that cut straight through German territory. And though there was talk about handing the territory back to Germany, both countries decided to remain true to the treaty and keep it in Belgian control. So then what does a modern-day European country do with this oddity? Well, they built a massive bike path. It's 125 kilometers or 78 freedom miles if you're American. It's a bike path that opened up in 2013. Now, this is a border that has come and gone multiple times. Estonia and Latvia were settled around 11,000 years ago, so pre-borders. But around the early 1900s, the region was looking for independence and started forming their own governments instead of being under Russian control. Now, moving towards World War I, though, both Germany and Russia designated both Estonia and Latvia under their control. And post-World War I, both regions found themselves besieged by those same Russian and German forces. But both countries were able to fight off the aggression and set up their own governments and set their borders, most of which went perfectly fine except for one minor issue. The town of Wok was where a major railway junction was located, and the town was exactly where they wanted the border drawn up. Both countries wanted that town. Now, the newly formed League of Nations stepped in, and after some deliberation, it was declared that the border followed a little stream that twists and turns through the center of town. The Estonian side became the town of Valga, and the Latvian town called Valka. Cute, right? It was an enforced border, but not really either at the same time. Then in 1939, in all the chaos of the Second World War, the Baltic region was ordered to have Soviet troops in all their regions, and well, we kind of know what that means, right? Now, once again under Russian control, the countries turned into regions and all border shenanigans were forgotten. Now you fast forward to 1990, and the region got sick of their Russian overlords, and both countries once again declared their independence. Again, that border popped up through the town again. And in the interim, there were several homeowners who had built in the old border, and they had their homes in both countries. Again, though, it was a mostly peaceful border and not too overly controlled, so I guess we can call it a checkpoint. But just 14 years later, both countries joined the European Union, and 3 years later, the Schengen zone. Now, for all us North Americans, that's just a bunch of countries that decided to strike down border control at all shared borders, meaning that border control was once again gone. And now the cities work closely together and even have a slogan: one city, two countries. And of course, I can't do this video without bringing up the most dangerous borders in the world, from the Iran-Iraq border to the latest issues between Russia and Ukraine. But still at number one for the most dangerous border of them all is the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. It's quite literally a 2.5-mile strip of death that stretches 160 miles long between the two countries. And this bit of land has historical events reaching back to 1953 with such charming names as the Axe murder incident. Though it is heavily guarded and really dangerous, it is still a popular tourist destination. Anyways, there are a few points of interest that you can visit along with local military guides that are actually within the demilitarized zone. But I don't think this needs to be said, but all those tourists are coming from the south. It's obvious, right? Now, of course, this border was put into place after the Korean War, and frankly, not going to get into most of that because it would be an episode all on its own. Let me know if you want me to do that down below. But since it's gone up, it has seen many skirmishes, yet remained relatively peaceful considering who's north of it. And while there is extensive numbers on the amount of military killed in and around the DMZ, there's nothing actually on the civilian deaths, really. That said, most defectors from North Korea wisely take the other route through China. Still wildly dangerous, but not anywhere near as controlled. Now let's take a look at some bonus facts, and let's stay with Korea for the first few. The creation of the demilitarized zone accidentally created a preserve. Animals that were on the verge of extinction are now actually thriving in the DMZ due to a lack of, well, anything. Specifically, the red-crowned or Manchurian crane has bounced back in the zone, which one of the happier accidents to come out of the conflict. While no scientists can get into the zone to confirm, there's anecdotal evidence that there are over 1,200 plant species, 83 fish varieties, and 51 different mammals that populate the area, most of which were actually considered to be extinct. Next up, North and South Korea are actually still considered at war, though many just refer to it as a conflict. Though the official Korean War ended in 1953, the peace treaty was never really officially signed. Instead, the two nations agreed to an armistice, or basically an agreement to stop fighting. To this day, the armistice exists, and within it, it calls for South and North Korea, along with China and the United States, to continue working on peace talks. And from what I can tell, it's not going great. And then back to Canada for the last couple. Now, despite it being largely undefended, there are many that try crossing the border illegally in many different areas. One specifically is the formerly mentioned Haskell Free Library and Opera House. You can enter this building from both Canada and the US, and while the border goes straight through the building, you can walk through it all without a problem. One trick is, though, you have to make sure you exit through the right door. Otherwise, you will have broken a law, and yes, they are actually watching for that. One specific incident saw someone try to use the parking lot to cross the border, hoping to avoid all the cameras in the area. It wasn't long, though, until that was squashed and the driver got a whole bunch of fines and was sent back. And finally, this land border was the scene of some really odd stuff during the pandemic, specifically in those border towns where some families had to stay completely separated. In fact, policies were put into place during the border lockdown that did not allow people to even touch across the border, something that literally kept families separated for over 3 years. Thanks for watching.